Oh, praises unto Yahweh Shem Shai. Double honors to the apostles of GMS. Honest you brothers that be pushing this truth in sincerity throughout the four corners of the earth. This is going to be a video following the title that you see before you, namely World War III starts in the Middle East, as spoken about within the scriptures, because the Lord said he was going to gather the people out there into the Middle East. Alright, so he says Saudi Arabia and Turkey consider a ground invasion of Syria. Alright, so it says, and they pose it as a question mark. Why do they pose it as a question mark? Because ultimately Saudi Arabia and Turkey considering the ground invasion of Syria will lead to ultimately what we know as World War III. Why do I say that? Because Saudi Arabia, along with other countries, are part of what's known as the OPEC nations. Namely, they've drawn up a treaty with the United States, which we know as Babylon within the scriptures, the book of Revelations, the 18th chapter. Alright, Isaiah, the 57th chapter, I believe, off the top of my head. Don't quote me on that, I might be incorrect. But nevertheless, the scriptures prove that Babylon is America, the land of confusion. To quote, and to exemplify that, it says the land which is known as Sodom and Gomorrah. Alright, and we also know that Babylon was going to be where the blood of the prophets was going to be spilt. That's spoken about within the book of Revelations, the 18th chapter, and the souls of men and so on and so forth. Alright, so we know that to be Babylon, and that's a place to be destroyed. However, the point still stands that Saudi Arabia has drawn up certain treaties with the so-called United States, and those treaties will ultimately lead to the United States getting involved. Now, Turkey, on the other hand, are part of the NATO nations, and part of the NATO agreement is that if one nation within NATO goes to war, then all of NATO is involved within that war. So you can see how these different factors, when we consider a ground invasion of Syria, will ultimately lead to World War III. Alright, now I've taken this World War III scenario in a few different directions based on the information present at the time. But from this information that we're seeing here, they're posing that a World War III scenario will cascade out of a Saudi Arabia, Turkey, hence NATO and America invasion of Syria, which will also Syria being defended by Iran, Russia, and hence China. In other words, a world war. So without much further ado, let me get into the article. It says, are Saudi Arabia and Turkey about to send ground troops in Syria? If so, how will Russia, Iran, and Syria and the Syrian government respond? In 2016, Syria has become a ground zero for a conflict that has been raging for centuries. For more than 1,000 years, the Sunnis and the Shiites have been wrestling with one another to control the Middle East. Now, one thing I always like to throw in there when they consider when they throw out the differences that you have between the different Muslims or type of Muslims that you got out there, and further to another degree, the differences that you have between Israel and the so-called Arab nations, is that of the fact that Albert Pike, in his letter Morals on Dogma, if I'm not mistaken, was quoted as saying that they were going to utilize the conflicts that you're going to have within the Middle East to spark off a World War III. Because ultimately, going back onto the statement made by Aleister Crowley, right? Aleister Crowley, he said that through chaos they were going to try to establish their order. All right, and we know that as their so-called New World Order, right, depopulating the earth up to 500 million. All right, therefore killing off 6.5 billion people, which is more closer to maybe 7 billion right now, maybe even 7.5 billion, because the Lord's got it to where everybody, right, is on the earth right now to do what? For judgment. Because the scripture says, if the wicked be increased, all right, it is for the sword. And the modern day sword being the ICBM nuclear missiles that's spoken about with great severity within the scriptures. All right, it says Turkey and other Sunni nations had hoped to turn Syria into a Sunni nation and for many years have been funding and arming ISIS and other Sunni insurgents groups in an attempt to overthrow the Assad regime. Initially, the Assad regime was losing quite a bit, quite a bit of ground, but the tide turned once Syria invited the Russians and the Iranians to help them. Okay, so you're seeing all of these different factors being involved in there. Sometimes I quote this, but it's nice to see it, in black and white, so to speak. Okay, so it says here now, of course, the Iranians have their own long-term goals. All right. Once Assad leaves power, the Iranians hope to turn Syria into a truly Shiite nation that is run and dominated by Hezbollah. At the moment, the Sunnis and the Shiites are winning. All right. I think it's supposed to say the Sunnis are losing and the Shiites are winning. It says relentless Russian airstrikes have enabled Syrian, Israeli, Iranian, and Hezbollah ground forces to advance, and now they have zeroed Aleppo. All right, so you go out there into Aleppo right now, they've raised it, as the scripture says. All right, but see, all of these things that are happening in the so-called third world out there, that's gonna transpire out into your so-called first world nations. Because what? Because as you're seeing these different factors here of Turkey and Saudi Arabia desiring to invade out there into Syria so they can take some kind of leverage of what the other than that, of what the Iranians and Hezbollah and Russia have done, that's going to lead to all that war, man. All right. And that's going to have it to where these different nations, that's just like how the scripture says in the book of Malachi, the 1st chapter and the 4th verse, man. They shall build up their cities. So you got America all built up, and they got, as it says in the book of Obadiah, the 1st chapter and the 3rd verse, although his head reach unto the clouds. You're seeing that stuff, all right? But the Most High is going to throw it down, man. All right? So all of these things that are happening out there in the Third World War, in the Third World, that's going to transpire into the First World when that Third World War comes, man. All right. It says before the war, Aleppo was the largest city in Syria, and if it falls, the war will be very close to over. It says thousands of refugee Jews are currently flooding out of Aleppo as Russians bombard the surrounding area continually, and there is little hope that the Sunni forces that once were so optimistic about overthrowing Assad could hold out much longer without help. All right. It says as the situation becomes increasingly desperate, Saudi Arabia and Turkey are now considering what was once unthinkable, a full-blown ground invasion of Syria. He says, of course, this could very well set off World War III. All right, so that's clear cut and simple. But it says Saudi Arabia and Turkey have already invested so much in the conflict that they don't want to appear to be willing to throw up their hands and walk away. All right, and it says, and just consider Turkish president's recap. I told reporters this weekend. It says what's going on in Syria can only go on for so long. At the same point, it has to change. It says Turkish president's recap. Okay, it says so. I mean, pretty much you see, you get a gist of what's going on, man. And you can read the rest for yourself and get into the different quotes and so on and so forth. But ultimately, the point was made. So with that, I'm gonna say all praises unto Yahweh Hashem Yahushai. All right, double honors to the apostles of GMS. Honestly, brothers, that be pushing this truth in sincerity. Shalom.